Okay, so we're going to be learning the Maamar Samach to Samach, the Tavshim Aleph, which the Rabbi said on Shabbos Parshas Kiseitze Yimel El Tavshim Aleph Maamar Kein Sicha, and which was Muga as the Kuntus Yimel El Tavshim Mem Zayin in honor of the 90th year of the wedding anniversary of the Frierdiker Rebbe. So this Maamar, I have a PowerPoint over here to hopefully will be helpful in going through the Nekudas of the Maamar. It is a Maamar that is miyusod on the Maamar Samach to Samach of the Rebbe Rashab from the year Tafresh Nun Zayin, from the Frierdiker Rebbe's Chasana. In fact, the Samach to Samach is a hemshech. It was apparently said in a number of Maamarim, in the way that we have it in Sefer Maamar Tafresh Nun Zayin. It is one long Maamar. That's how the Rebbe Rashab wrote it out. So we don't have it divided into Maamarim like we have in other hemshechim. So we don't know, at what point one Maamar ended and another Maamar began, but it is, it's a Maamar that is very focused on the concept of simcha and what the power of simcha is, and it's an arichos, it's an extended meditation on the concept of simcha. And the Rebbe in this Maamar, you see in the Aros, many places that he's mitzayin to this hemshech. It goes for quite a few pages. It's quite long, and the Rebbe quotes from throughout certain basic nekudas in this Maamar, but also woven into the Maamar are a number of other little snippets that are taken in one way or another from the Maamar Samach to Samach, although I believe we could see that the Rebbe presents it in a slightly different way. I'm not sure about it, about everything I'm saying over here, but I think that in one sense the Rebbe is focused particularly on the concept of Avodas HaAdam and how that relates to bringing about simcha, and how simcha relates to Avodas HaAdam. So as we'll see. Now, I did want to add that on the concept of simcha, we know that the Rebbe put a big emphasis on simcha. The Rebbe spoke on occasion about the concept of simcha b'taharasa, that there's a concept of simcha shal mitzvah or things like that. Simcha that is related to something else that we're doing. But the Rabbi also spoke about the concept of simcha b'taharasa, of pure simcha, just simcha for the sake of simcha. And I think that some more explanation and more clarity on this idea can come out of this Maamar. The Rabbi also spoke about the concept of tshuva mitech simcha, and there's the big chiddush of the Rabbi and the Maamar Margala B'Puma de Rava from Tashim and Vav, where he talks about the concept of only simcha with regard to tshuva, of negating the idea of merirus entirely, of bitterness, and focusing, doing tshuva exclusively with a feeling of simcha. And I believe also that in this Maamar we see some background to that as well, the concept of simcha being the engine of change. So let's get into the Maamar, and we'll discuss as we go along. So of course the Maamar is on the bracha of the Shabbat brachas. Samach the Samach reim ha'ahuvim k'samecha yitzircha b'gan eden mikadem. We ask Hashem, Samach the Samach, to make the reim ha'ahuvim, the beloved friends, rejoice, just like you made your creation yitzircha rejoice in Gan Eden way back when. The Abu Raham explains, and this is cited, we'll see a little later in this Maamar and the Rebbe Shabbos Maamar, that Reim Ahuvim, the beloved friends, are reference to the Chassan Kala, and then we refer to Kesamecha Yitzircha, that Hashem made his creation rejoice, that when he created Adam and Chava, he made them rejoice in Gan Eden, back then, and that the Chassan Kala should experience the same joy. So Mavur B'Dibra Masal Zeh Shenamar Beis Chasnas Chag Muchad Morbi and Vaver Shabbos Kodesh Yitgimel El Tavesh and Zayin the Reim Ahuvim Mechinas Chachma Bina Shenikraim Train Rein Lomis Parsha. So the Rebbe Rashab explains in the Samach the Samach that the term Reim Ahuvim Api Chasidus refers to Chachma and Bina. Chachma and Bina are referred to as two friends that Reim, same term, that are never separated. And as we'll see later, there's a distinction between Reim and Daidim. That Reim refers to a relationship that is constant. This is based on a Zohar. It doesn't say it in exactly this language, but that's the Teicha. And Bakasha Samach the Samach Reim Ahuvim Mishatum Shach Simcha V'Chachma Bina. So when we say that Hashem should make the Reim Ahuvim rejoice, we're asking Hashem to bring Simcha into Chachma Bina. That is what the Rebbe Rashab is forward. And then the question is asked, and this is the Rebbe Rashab's question, Tzarech L'havin, Harei Bina hi Mekayim Simcha K'mish Kasav Abanos Smecha. There's already Simcha in Bina. That is the characteristic of Bina, that it is the place of joy. The term Ema Banim refers to Bina because Bina is the mother that generates the Midas. We see clearly, with our own senses, that when a person understands some concept in their seichel, that brings them great joy. Because we have also the concept, so you say, fine, that's as far as Bina is concerned. What about Chachma? That is, you can't talk about Simcha with regard to Chachma, because Simcha comes specifically when there's Gilui, when something is revealed. Chachma is higher than revelation, which is only a flash. But Chachma has something greater than Simcha. It has the revelation of Einig, of pleasure. And we find that the Yerushalmi says that Rabbi Avo, his face was shining because he found the new Tosafta. The shining of the face comes from the revelation of pleasure. How do we know that the tzivas apanim is from Einig? So the truth is that in the Gemara it says, it relates this to the pasuk Chachmas Adam Tar Panav. So it says that's a result of Chachma. I think also the idea that it says that Matzah Tosefta Charata, that he found a new Tosefta. Truth is that the Lashon Gemara is that he found a Tosefta Atikta. He found an old Tosefta, but for him it was new, right? But the idea of Matzah, the Metzia, right? That's the Barak HaMavrik. So that's caused itself upon of. It is not necessarily that he understood the Tosefta. It's just that he found it, and that alone caused his face to shine. So that's Kidui Hainik. That's my understanding. You do the einig l'mayim simcha. We know that einig is higher than simcha. So so if chachma is not the place of simcha, but it's the place of einig, and einig is even greater than simcha. So why are we asking that Hashem should make the reim over rejoice? Since in any case, Bina already has simcha. How much more so with regard to chachma that has the idea of einig, of pleasure, that is even beyond simcha. Now the Rebbe asks the second question. Reim ahuvim refers in the Pashto Pshat, like I said before, looking at the it refers to chasam v'kala. Now we know that Alpi Chasidus, chasam and kala represent za and nukva, the 6 midos from chesed to yesod and malchus. So mahu akesher, the Peter's that shirei mahuvim koi achasam v'kala zun in bir janal derei mahuvim mechachma bina. So what's the connection between these two pirushim? It's two different pirushim. If the pirush apashut is that refers to chasam v'kala, and we talk about what is the spiritual correspondence to chasam v'kala, which is of nukva, still rei mahuvim is not chachma bina in that case. So how does this relate to the pirush that rei mahuvim refers to chachma and bina? Now, this question the Rebbe Rashab does not ask directly. The Rebbe Rashab does say that by a bracha the chasima has to be me'ein hapsicha. You have to finish the bracha similar to how the bracha began. So if we begin the bracha talking about rei mahuvim, but we conclude the bracha by saying Samach chasam v'kala, so then in the beginning we're talking about chachma bina, and at the end of the bracha Samach chasam v'kala we're talking about zav and nukva. So how does that connect? But I think that the Rebbe, we know that in many cases the Rebbe will ask the question that as deep as you want to go up, it has to come back to the Pashto Pshat, right? It has to still be true according to Pshat. So if according to Pshat, Re'em Ha'ahuvim refers to Chasam V'Kala, then which is Zav Nukva, then even al pi Chasidus, there has to be some connection between Re'em Ha'ahuvim Chachma Bina and Re'em Ha'ahuvim Zav Nukva, and the answer to this is of course found in the words of the Rebbe Rashab as well. So the Rebbe is presenting what the Rebbe Rashab says in a way that we can understand it in a fresh way through the Rebbe's Maamar. Okay, so for the next sif, the Rebbe is actually going to draw on other sources. He's going a little bit out of the Maamar. It's based on something said in the Maamar, but the beer, the two relations of midas to Melukat is something that the Rebbe adds, and I'm not sure I haven't learned the entire Samach to Samach. It could be that it's discussed over there, but I don't. But he's not mentioning to it, so I'm assuming that it's not in there. Okay, so the Rebbe continues. Ve'ishleimar yuvan zeh kasher l'shnei pirushim malpi mashakosav sefer emes Yaakov huva b'maamar hanal de'ahuvim b'gemati yadoidim be'heim zav nukva. So in Sefer Emes Yaakov is a Sefer, Kabbalah Sefer, and over there he brings this idea that Ahuvim B'Gematria Daidim. He's talking about the bracha Samach Samach, and he gives this gematria. Now, we mentioned before that there's a concept of reim and there's a concept of doidim. Reim, we said, is the idea of chachma bina train reim, the lamis parshin, two friends that are not that never separate. So So in Shiur HaShiurim, there's a pasuk which begins Basti Ligani Achaisi Kala, right? That we're all familiar with. But it goes on to say, so if I come to my garden, my sister, the Kala, the bride, and then it continues Arisi Modi Ubasami. It talks about different yonam spices and foods that he's bringing together for this celebration of the Kala. And the pasuk concludes, Ichlu Reim, eat friends, Shtu v'shikru daidim, drink and get drunk, daidim. Daidim is another word for friends, and the word daidi, and either daidi or daidi li, but is found in a number of places in Shiur HaShiurim. So we have these two groups, the Reim and the Daidim, and that's what we're going to have to understand what each one is. So Amos Yaakov says that Ahuvim is Begematria Daidim, and Daidim refers to Zav and Nukva. As we know, that Reim is Chachma Bina, and Daidim is Zav and Nukva. So Ichlu Reim Chachma Bina, it says Ichlu, eat, and they are the Reim. They're the ones that are never separated. And then the Daidim, as we're going to see a little later, that their zivug is leprakim, that sometimes they're together and sometimes they're not together, and that's a reference to Zavinuk. That's true of Zavinuk. So the Rabbi continues, Mashkasav Reim Ha'ahuvim. So the bracha says, calls Reim Ha'ahuvim, the Tevis Ha'ahuvim Hi Behemshech, the Toyar Shel Reim Shakaya Kanal HaChachma Bina. The word Ahuvim is follows, and it describes the word Reim, which Reim refers to Chachma Bina. So the Reim are described as Ahuvim, which is Begematria Daidim. So this has to be explained. So what is the connection? Clearly the connection between the Daidim and the Reim. Now, it's interesting that in Amos Yaakov, the nusach that he has is Reim Ahuvim. Samach Reim Ahuvim. Reim refers to Chachma Bina. Ahuvim refers to Zav and Nukva as Daidim, Begematria Daidim. I think that there's also nusach Reim Va'ahuvim. So that would separate the two groups, right? Samach, both the Reim and the Ahuvim. But in Nusach Chabad, the Nusach is Reim Ha'ahuvim. So Ha'ahuvim means it's a description of the Reim. So there's clearly a close connection between Reim Chachma Bina and Ahuvim, the Gematria Daidim, which refers to Zav and Nukva. So how so? So the Rabbi says there's two ways of explaining this, or two ways in which this is true. Both ways are true. So Aleph, the first way is how do midas come from Meichin? That the process through which midas are born from the intellect is that first they exist within the Meichin, and then they come out in a revealed way and as midas. So there's midas sheva Meichin. So knowing this, we can explain Reim Ahuvim as follows: the Reim Ahuvim koi alzun Ahuvim kemoshim klulim b'chachma bina Reim. That Reim Ahuvim refers to zun as they are within chachma bina, as the Ahuvim as they are within the Reim. So it's not Reim stam, it's not just chachma bina, but it's Reim Ha'ahuvim. It's the Ahuvim within the Reim. It's the midos as they are within the Meichin yet. There is the understanding of the concept. That's the Meichin, and then there is the evaluation of the concept. that from that evaluation is going to come the relevant midas, ava, yira, whatever it might be, whatever the response, the emotional response will be to this concept that exists within the understanding itself. There is a stage at which we're beyond just understanding it, but we're at a stage of I think we could say evaluating. It's a good thing, it's a bad thing, it's something that you should want or something that you should stay away from, or whatever whatever the particular midah will be. So that's Rema Shenkein Ahuvim Stam Koyalzum Commission Shach Megillah. If you have just the word Ahuvim without any other word attached to it, you say Samach Ahuvim, then it would refer to Zav and Nukva as they are Begilu of Megamatia Daidu. Right? But Reim HaAhuvim is Ahuvim the way they are in the world of Reim. And the Rabbi continues up. He's a Yuvan Kamzesha in the Zun Doidim Merumas Bagamatria Ahuvim Begamatria Doidim. That's why this is a concept of gematria. That in this term, Reim Ahuvim, Zun are alluded to by a gematria. Right? It doesn't say Doidim. It says Ahuvim, but Ahuvim is a gematria Doidim. The gematria Moira Al Miut Ha'or V'Chayos Miut Achamiyut. You know, in Tanya and Sharich Ramuna, he talks about how gematria indicates that the Or V'Chayos, that the light and the vitality is diminished. Diminishment after diminishment. That there's the energy that comes from the letters and words of Asar Maamar themselves, and then there's energy that comes from the way those same letters are mixed around to create other words, and then there's a even further level in which the word is only a gematria of something in the Asar Maamar. So it's a very greatly filtered level of energy from Alakus. So here we have Ahuvim Megamatria Doidim Ki Amshacha Me'amidas Remoich and Reim Ahuvim Me'amidas Shuvalev Ahuvim Megamatria Doidim. Here are the comments into it, because in order to get from the midas as they are within the mind, Reim HaAhuvim, to midas in the heart, Ahuvim Megamatria Doidim, there are a number of symptoms, a number of filters and dimming down, diminishment of the energy that takes place. The Rebbe in the Ha'ara talks about the idea of Meitzer Hagarin, that there's a concept that the neck is like a narrow channel that kind of blocks the understanding of the mind from reaching the heart. So, in order for what the mind understands to reach the heart, that means it has to go through symptom, has to go through certain barriers, certain filters. And actually the concept of Meitzer Hagarin is brought down in the Maamar Samach as well. It talks in a moment about the idea of Simcha Parit together, that Simcha allows what the mind understands to come through the Meitzer Hagarin, through that narrow channel of the neck into the midas of the heart. At any rate, so midas as they are in the heart are only a gematria of the midas the way they are within Meichem. So that's one way of understanding the relationship between midas and Meichem. Then there's a second relationship between midas and Meichem. Ubeis. The Mekivan Shamidas and told us Hameichem, that since midas are told us, they are generated by the mind, they are the product of the mind. Chachma bina him av v'eim, v'zunim benu bas. Chachma bina are called Ab Em, Ava, and Zun are called Ben Bas, son and daughter. Kidisa b'Kabbalah, she'Ava Em Heim Yudkei Chachma Bina. In Kabbalah it says that Ava Em correspond to Yudkei of Hashem Avaya, which is corresponding to Chachma Bina. Ben Bas Heim Vavkei. And Ben Bas relates to Vavkei Zun, right? Which is the Midas and Malchus. So since midas are the children of the Meichem, so they still bear a resemblance to the Meichin even after they have come out as Midas. They're no longer Meichin, they're no longer the Midas Sheba Meichin, but they're now Midas in the heart. But they still have a resemblance to the Meichin of Meirish Levanoi Chulu Yasha Yesh Makim HaMeirish. Because Api Halacha, right? The Rebbe always likes to connect Chassidus with Nigla, that a father passes everything he has over to his son, to the extent that the Yerish, the inheritor, the heir, is b'makam ha'merish, is in the place of the one that passed on the inheritance. In other words, it's not like receiving something from somebody else, like a present or something that you buy. But when it comes to Yerusha, it means that the son is in the place of the father. It is not transferred possessions. It's remained in the same possession because he stands in the place of the father. That's how close the child is to the parent. This is not only about a son; it's true with regard to a daughter as well. When the daughter inherits in a place that when there's no son, and the inheritance passes on to the daughter, so she is b'makam ha'merish. And it is true with regard to money. It's true with regard to all kinds of other things as well, with regard to personality, with regard to koiches, koich haben mikoich ha'av, and all kinds of things that pass on from parents to children. Over Pratius, the Rabbi adds in the brackets, haben b'makam ha'av abasi b'makam ha'em kushkosov ki ima bita. And more specifically, the son is in the place of the father, and the daughter is in the place of the mother, as the pasuk says, like mother, like daughter. Now, so based on this concept, that the Midas and Malchus are children, Ben Obas, of Chacham and Bina. So now we can explain even after the Midas have come out as midas in the heart. They reveals in the heart. They are still referred to as reim ha'ahovim. The word reim can apply to them as well, even though generally we say that zun are called doidim. The canal, the reim ha'ahovim b'pashtus, koyel chas v'kala. We said before, the reim ha'ahovim b'pashtus. The pashtus pshat is that it means chas v'kala. Zun shebegilu. We're not talking about chas v'kala. Don't correspond with the midas as they are in the Meichin. They correspond to the midas as they are in the heart, and they're still called reim ha'ahovim because even then, even after they have been drawn out into a manifest state, they are similar. They resemble chachma and bina. So we understand reim ha'ahovim in two ways. In the first way, the ahuvim are contained in the reim. The second way, the reim are contained in the ahuvim. And actually, both of these are important to understand for the concept of this Maamar. Not just to answer the second question, but to understand the process of simcha and how it how it works. But one thing that the Rebbe is showing over here is that the idea of Zah and Malchus are present in the phrase Reim HaAhuvim already. There's some, it's not two distinct ideas, the Chacham Bina and Zah v'Nukva, but they are connected to each other. What happens to one affects the other, and that's very important for what we're going to be talking about over here. So we've spoken about two ways in which the Meichin and the Midas relate to each other. First of all, that the Midas start off as being Meichin, and second of all, that midas contain some aspect of Meichan in them, even once they are midas begilui, even though they're out of the world of Meichan, they're out of the intellectual world and in the emotional world, but they are still shaped by the Meichan. Never even in the Ahuvim there is the idea of Reim. All right. Yeah. The next sif, the Rebbe kind of ties this together a little more. So these two relationships are related to the bakasha as well of Samach to Samach. The Rebbe says that the connection between the two taichin and Rei Mahuvim, the Pirush Ikri, who Sharei Mahuvim Kachach Mabina Kavur Baruch B'Maimer. The main Pirush of Rei Mahuvim is that refers to Chacham Mabina, right? Reim, the as a word, the Pashto Pshat Api Chassidus is that it refers to Chacham Mabina. But there's another Pirush that Rei Mahuvim also refers to Zun. Gam is in parentheses. It refers to Zun, but it refers to Zun Gam. It's as like an extension of the Pirush that's Rei Mahuvim. But this is true also Gam Inyan Samach to Samach. Also with regard to the Bakasha, that Hashem should bring joy to the Rei Mahuvim, that this is true on two levels. And this is something that the Rebbe Rashab states clearly in the Maamar Kizah, Shemavakshim, Shetumshach Asimcha B'Chachma Bina. Because when we ask that Simcha should be brought in the Chachma Bina, which is Pirush Ikri B'Rei Mahuvim, right? Which was what the Rebbe Rashab starts the Maamar off, and he asks why it's necessary to bring Simcha into them. But at any rate, that is what we're asking, that Hashem should bring Simcha into Chachma Bina. After even though they have Simcha and Eineg, which is even higher than Simcha, anyways. So why are we asking that Hashem should bring Simcha into them? So what we're asking, he says, is we're asking that there should be a higher level of Simcha that is brought into Chachma Bina, higher than what they naturally have, as we're going to explain. But that brings us to the second part, that the whole reason why it's necessary to bring this higher level of Simcha and Chachma Bina. Why are we asking that Hashem should bring a higher level of Simcha and Chachma Bina? Anicha, that there could be a greater Simcha brought into Chachma Bina. Why is it necessary? That is because through this Simcha and this Gili will come down into Zun as well, as they are Zav and Nukva, as they are at the level of Midas, Chas Makala, the second taich in Reim Ahuvim that have the influence of Reim in them. Okay. And this next ayah, the Rebbe begins to talk about this concept, the two levels of Simcha, or the two, I should say, categories of Simcha, which is Simcha Hamurkav and Simcha Atzmis. So, but the Rebbe starts again Avaidadik and kind of Nigladik, but to bring out what the various levels of Simcha are. So the Rebbe says, "Va'ininu v'hine avayet tzarchlius b'simcha, v'shkasu idus avayet b'simcha." So there's a concept of Simcha, just like we were saying before about Chachma and Bina, that Bina is the Makkah of Simcha. There's a concept of Simcha that is always applicable. A person has to be an Eved Hashem, has to be serving Hashem, or Eved Hashem, and to serve Hashem has to be done with joy, Hashem b'simcha, and it says Tachat levalta, because you have not served Hashem your God b'simcha v'tu levav, which is a longer discussion, like the Rebbe's Mitzayim in the in Ara 22. All the Pirushim and the levels and the concepts that are included in what this pasuk suggests, right? But Adam tzarich lavod and survive b'chol inyonav, since a person has to serve Hashem in all matters of his life. So first of all, you have to serve Hashem with all parts of your life. So the serving Hashem has to be done with simcha. And beyond that, beyond the concepts of mitzvahs that relate to all the various parts of life, there is also the concept of masacha, the things that you do, but that they have to be done the Shem Shemayim, for the sake of heaven, and even more than that, that you have to know Hashem through Kol Derchecha, that itself is a way of knowing Hashem, as the Rabbi explains at length at other places. See the Aris. The extent that serving Hashem is the whole purpose for which we are created, we are only created, as the nusach that is brought on Chassidus, is that I was only created to serve my Creator. That's my whole purpose. There's nothing else in my life. So therefore, a person must always be in a state of joy. However, there are different levels of joy. So the this is the default level of simcha, right? The factory settings. You wake up in the morning, you have to be b'simcha because you have to serve Hashem on a regular Wednesday. But then there are levels of joy. At the time of this recording, we're entering Chodesh Adar, time of joy. Right? We know also al pi halacha that there are particular places that are places of joy. Right? Like a building something that is related to joy. A person builds a house for a son to get married in. It's a binyan shel simcha. Likewise, with regard to time, there are special times. There's zmanim miyuchadim, yamim tovim she'em maraglim b'simcha. There's a day of Yom Tov, which are moyadim. They are set times for joy. And the Maamar, the Rabbi Shab connects this to the idea of bina. That moyadim is a time. Yom Tov is a time of the revelation of bina, and therefore it's a time of joy. And then even within the moyadim, within Yom Tovim, there are different levels. Like Chag HaSukkos, moyadim simcha is true for all the Yom Tovim. Then comes Sukkos, and Sukkos in particular is Zman Simcha Seinu. It's a Yom Tov that is dedicated in particular to Simcha. And then within Sukkot itself, Befrat Simcha Beis Sha'eva, the Mishal Leira Simcha Beis Sha'eva Leira Simcha Miyama, that there is the rejoicing at Beis Sha'eva, where they drew the water. That if the person had not seen the way they rejoiced in the Simcha Beis Sha'eva, he had never seen joy. That's the highest level of joy, or a very high level of joy. As we see, it's not the highest. But what was special about Simcha Beis Sha'eva, one of the things that was special about it, that the Gemara says that they would dance with torches of fire, juggling torches of fire. That the torches of fire represent Chachma, and the dancing with the torches means to bring down the idea of Chachma into Bina. So maybe that's he's saying that's a higher level of joy, that it's not just the joy of Bina, but the joy of Bina as it's illuminated through the light of Chachma. Perhaps that's an even greater level of joy. That's why it's the ultimate Leira Simcha Miyama. And the Rabbi adds in the brackets that even so was Beis Sha'eva Gufa, there were different levels. But Gamba Simcha Zu Gufish, look at Dargis, the Rambam says that the main rejoicing was done by the great sages of Israel, and the regular people came to watch. They didn't actively participate in the dancing, so people rejoice at different levels. Clearly, if you're standing on the side and watching, there's a joy and excitement of being there. But certainly, there's an even greater joy when you're the one dancing with the torches. Then there's an even greater level of joy. So befrat b'simchas Torah. Simcha the simchas Torah in al zezer gami simcha the simchas b'sheva k'dei simcha k'dei Torah. There's the rejoicing of simchas Torah, which is even greater than simchas b'sheva. As the Alter Rebbe says in the K'dei Torah in Shaft Mayim. Yeah, he talks about Simchas Beis Sheva is not written explicitly in the Torah, but there's a remez, and there's an even greater level of joy, which is Simchas Torah, which is entirely a minig, and it's not you can't even come into writing at any level. It's beyond being put into words. The Rebbe says that the very name of the day, the name of everything, indicates what its meaning is and what its chayis is, where it gets its chayis from. So the name of the day is Simchas Torah. So the Simchas is in the name. It's a little bit hard to understand what the Rebbe is saying with this, because he's saying that itself shows that this is an even greater level of simcha, that the simcha is like hardwired into Simchas Torah in a way that's not true of other levels of simcha. You could say the same about Simchas Beis Sheva. The name Simchas Beis Sheva is also has the word simcha in it. So maybe Simchas Beis Sheva, because it's only in a particular time in a particular place. It's not the whole Yom Tov. It's not the whole day. It's in the Beis Hamikdash at night when it was done. Then you had Simchas Beis Sheva. Maybe also that's not really a title. It's the Simcha of Beis Sheva. Anyways, okay. So the Rebbe says the calls a move on. From all this understood, she has kama v'kama dagas for simcha. That there are many levels of simcha, but the nachalaka is well in general. We have two kinds of joy. There's simcha shemur kevas ve'ezer davar. Okamai simcha shemur hasaga seichel keitzeh bazeh. There is simcha that is more kevas. It is built. It is put together. It is composed of different parts. In other words, there is the joy, and the joy is like triggered by something. There's something that brings about the joy. So, for example, simcha that comes because a person understood something in seichel bina, right? You understand, and you understand it well, and that brings joy. But that joy is a result of some trigger. Something brought it about. Such joy is in the revealed kaichas, in the conscious faculties that we have, that we're aware of, we can identify, and it is limited. It is limited by what sets it off, right? Depending on what brings about the joy, that will determine and define what kind of joy it is, how intense it is, how much it is, in what way it expresses itself, and so forth. But then there's a higher level of joy that the Rebbe Shab talks about. Simcha atzmis shehi v'ikra b'etzem hanefesh. There is a simcha atzmis. There's a simcha that is in of the etzem. It is an essential simcha that it is in the etzem hanefesh. That's where it exists, and ikra b'etzem hanefesh. It's, in other words, it's something that is a result of etzem hanefesh. It is an auto simcha. It's a simcha that comes from etzem hanefesh itself. It's not coming from anything else that's bringing it about. So this has no limitations. This simcha has no limitations because it's not because of something. It's part of etzem hanefesh. So, and this, as we're going to see, this is the higher level of simcha that has to be brought into Chacham and Bina when we say Samach to Samach, Reim HaHoven. And the reason why we want this greater, the Simcha Atmis to be revealed to Chacham and Bina is for it to come down into Zun as well. And as we're going to see in the next part, the most powerful Simcha that can accomplish the most the greatest effect is this Simcha Atmis. Changes through Simcha. So v'yuvan zeh al pi hamavur ba'amayim risham sheteva simcha hi lifritz geder. So we spoke here about different levels of simcha, and particularly the two categories: the simcha that's more keves, and the simcha that's atmis. So to explain this better, the Rebbe Rashab says in the Maamar, gives a concept, a rule, that the nature of simcha is that it's put together, it bursts through confines. He goes ba'arichos over there to describe this in various ways that this comes out, and how a person can be a quiet person and an edel person in general, but if there's a time of joy, then they'll be very talkative, and they'll have no problem speaking in front of great people, even though usually they would be very timid, and a number of different ways that this that we see this, and the Rebbe is going to talk about some of that here as well. It breaks through all kinds of limitations, all kinds of confines within the person, within the soul, within ourselves. As we mentioned before, one of those being in order for the seichel to come down into midas, that itself requires a bursting through the boundaries of mitzvah hagarin. And that's what simcha does. That's why that's an effect of Idus Hashem b'simcha. Observing Hashem with joy allows for the ideas that we think about in our mind to affect our mitzvahs. But let's see what the Rebbe says. The Rebbe Rashab explains and discusses two ways in which simcha bursts through confines, bursts through the gedar. So one way is there are certain gedarim, there are certain limitations or certain inhibitions, let's say, that a person might have because that's how they're habituated. They've gotten into the habit of being a certain way. Hagam shegdarim elu nasu, that's like keteba, ki hergel nasa teva sheni. So these gedarim, these limitations, may have even become second nature to him. We know that hergel nasa teva sheni. So if you're used to, to acting in a certain way, you're kind of set in your ways, as they say. So it's even to the extent that in a certain way it's nature, like it's very embedded, it's very burnt in to your character by this point. Let's say, for example, that a person has habituated themselves in certain ways of spending money, right? He talks in the Maamar about a person who's a kilai. He's miserly, but when he's in when he rejoices, he can be very generous. So sometimes, sometimes a person, for whatever reason, has trained themselves to act in a more, let's say, in a more miserly way or more frugal way, right? But it's become teva sheni. That's how that person acts with regard to tzedakah, with regard to what level of extravagance they run their house at, how much money they spend on this or that. That's become their tava. But then there's a second kind of geder that simcha bursts through. That simcha has the power to burst through even those limitations that are natural, that are in the inborn nature. So this is not something that is just a habit or a long-time habit, but it's something that this is how the person was born. People are born with certain personalities, and you can't change those personalities. That's how they are. Like a person who likes to think everything over. That could be that's just how they're born. They're born that personality, and for them to become a spontaneous person, it's like practically impossible. The power of simcha is so great that it can even not only expand the tava. The person will go beyond their comfort zone, but to actually transform and to change these characteristics from one extreme to the other extreme. Behind what this means, the Masha Simcha, Baratzas Hakdorim, Shabbatava Tudasa, Yuloy Raksha, Oisim Amidish, Hutbu Ba'adam Him Beribui, the Iskabras V'yezim Mikfimidas. One way of saying Simcha together would be to say that when a person is in a state of joy, then it can break through the limitations of their nature, that those character traits that they have will now be in a much greater way than normal. So, if a person is let's say a generous person, by the time of joy they'll be more generous. But in fact, simcha has an even greater power. That through simcha, the actual nature of one's midas changes from one extreme to the other. They transform and do a 180 degree turnaround. He gives an example here that Mishu Kamton Bikilai B'Yosef Tavzadas is somebody who, by the very nature, is very miserly. In the simcha, the time of joy, when he's in a rejoicing in a very great joy, his heart will be entirely transformed from its earlier nature, and it becomes very generous, very free with his money, and will do a lot of generosity. And it'll become so generous that he will be as generous as somebody who is naturally generous. To the extent that this person will even do kind things even to somebody that he hates. And there it says, this is true even to somebody that he hates apitera. Could be a person hates somebody. It's not a good midah. It's actually an isser. But sometimes, not everybody's perfect. But there is a concept of saying apitera, right? When a person sees that somebody that they know has done an avera, and there's no two adim, so they can't be brought to accountability for it. But he knows that person sinned. Then apitera, they're supposed to hate them. And nevertheless, because of simcha, they'll be good to that person in a very generous way. It's interesting that in the Maamar of the Rebbe Rabbi, he talks about that this simcha gedolah is, for example, when somebody makes a chasna for his son, which obviously was very relevant for the Rebbe Rabbi at the time that he was saying these Maamar. It was on the chasna of his son, and the Rebbe barely references the idea of the chasna for this. The idea of chasna obviously is connected to Samach. It's connected to the Sheva bracha, so that does come in. The idea of the joy that a father has making a chasna for a son. There's a small allusion to it at the end of the Maamar, but it's not really discussed. Okay, so these are the two stages, let's say, the two ways in which simcha fits together. So even in regard to the first way, that a person can change their habits, that has become talasheni. If a person has a habit that they, for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, it's very hard to break that pattern of behavior. So we have to understand, since a person's habit becomes his nature, even though it's only second nature, it's not your inborn nature, but still to your nature. It's really impressed on yourself, on your soul. So we would think that you would need a long time, a lot of avodah to change that nature, little by little. How does joy have the power to change it in 1 minute? A person doesn't just go and become a different person in 1 second. We know, often with regard to Balei Tshuva, right? Someone's coming about Tshuva, so you say, take it slow. Don't take on everything all at once. You can't change. You were one kind of person, you're living one kind of life, yesterday, and now you're going to suddenly grow a full beard and wear tzitzis and yarmulke, whatever. You can drop it as fast as you started it. So you have to kind of take time to undo your previous habits and develop new ones. But here we're saying that Simcha has the power to change a person in 1 moment from their habits. How much more so even Abay's when it comes to the second level, you have to understand how can Simcha break through the confines of a person's nature to the extent that it can change his nature, his very inborn characteristics from one extreme to the other. If you're born that way, so it's not just a matter of habit and of slowly changing it to something else. A person is a certain way. How can that change through Simcha? Simcha is great. It gets you, gets you very excited. But to have this transformative effect, what is it about Simcha that has this transformative effect on a person? So the Indian who before Maamar Sham, so the Rebbe Shab explains in the Maamar the Masha Simcha Piratz is Geder. I feel by from Aleph and Kolshke by from Abayz who dafka b'Simcha Gezu Shemagas b'Etzam HaNefesh. That when we say that Simcha is Piratz Geder, even with regard to the first way of changing your habits, how much more so with regard to changing your very nature, this is true specifically about such a level of Simcha that reaches the Etzam HaNefesh, the Simcha that is at the level of Etzam HaNefesh. That is beyond our conscious faculties, those that we're aware of on a daily basis. And at the level of Kechas HaGiluyim, it's true that you can't just change in an instant, or sometimes at all. But when it comes to Etzam HaNefesh, to the Yesha Etzam HaNefesh, Ulamayla, Megeder Hagbala, there's a Kasher Ma'atmos, because the Etzam HaNefesh is beyond any limitation, because Etzam HaNefesh is connected with Atzmus. So it's not just that my Etzem is higher than my Kechas Hagluyim. Because if we're still talking about me as a human being, so ultimately my Etzem is also limited. It's not limited in the same way as my Kechas Hagluyim are, but it is limited. But here he says that it's Kasher Ima Atzmus. The Etzem HaNefesh of a Yid is connected with Atzmus of Hashem, which has no limitations whatsoever. So the Simcha that comes from Etzam HaNefesh breaks through all kinds of limitations, and therefore there is no limitation that can really stand in the way of this Simcha. Now, the question is such a Simcha accessible? And how do we connect to it? So I think that's something that the Rebbe wants to develop a little bit further on in the Maamar. Okay, but now we're gonna take this back to the topic at hand. The idea that this higher level of Simcha, this Simcha Atzmis, is the Simcha that we want to we want Hashem to introduce into Chachma and Bina that the joy of Chachma and Bina should not be only at the kind of basic level or the limited. I'm sure it's a very lofty level of simcha, but it is still defined and confined and based on it's murkav. It's a result of a trigger of a saga, let's say, at the level of bina, or the like, or the einig of chachma, which comes from the barak hamavrik, comes from the flash of insight. But we're asking that there should be this higher level should be revealed, and this is part of a process of uniting zav and nukva. So Samach the Samach So going on to Izvav, this is the bakasha that we ask in the bracha that Hashem should bring joy to the Rei Ma'ahuvim. We want to bring simcha down into Chachma Bina. Agam shemakam simcha bina, even though Bina is the place of joy. And the Chachma has the characteristic of pleasure that is beyond joy. So it's already joy because the Kiyas Simcha Shebabina because when we're talking about the joy of Bina and the pleasure of Chachma, this is like, at any rate, the joy and the pleasure that are at the level of Keichas HaGaluyim. I mean, we could say for sure when we're talking about Chachma and Bina Vatzilos that we're certainly not. I mean, we're talking about a Lukus, so it's not limited in the same way that the Keichas HaGaluyim of a human being are. But at any rate, it's dugmas, right? Like the Alter Rebbe says that ultimately our characteristics are a result through a process of ishtalshalus from the midas of the spheres halienis. So there is some similarity in some way. So at some level, there is some kind of limitation here. And the Rebbe asked a question, which the Rebbe Shab talks about also, or mentions also. He says, although it's true that it's brought down in Chassidus, that the pnimius, the inner level, the deeper dimension of Abba, of Chachma, is the pnimius Atik, is the deeper dimension of Atik. Now, what exactly this means, I'm not a big maven, but Pnimius Atik. So Atik is connected with Einig. Is Pnimius Akeser is connected with especially Pnimius Atik is Ein Sof is the ultimate, is beyond any description. And Pnimius Abba. So when we talk about Chachma, we're talking about a certain level of seichel. It has a tzir. It has a it fits within a certain framework of logic, let's say, at some level of reason, of intellect. But there is a level where, for example, it says that Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, "Shtoik kach olav machshava." Be silent. This is what has arisen in my thought. That which means that there is a certain concept that cannot be explained in seichel. Moshe Rabbeinu is trying to understand, why does Rabbi Akiva have to suffer, and Hashem says, "Shtoik." You have to be silent. This is you can't use the tools of seichel to take this. This is beyond. This goes to the very core, and that's the pnimius of Abba. That the real chachma is only intellectual in the way that it presents itself externally. But the inner dimension of Chachma really, and in a sense, it's an insight also into our Chachma. A person understands what they want to understand. They understand the way they want things to be. There's a certain kind of gut feeling that we have about truth and about things that our mind then understands in an intellectual way. But ultimately, at the deepest level, it's really beyond intellect. So the question over here is that if Chachma is not only the place of Einik, but previous Abba is previous Atik, and Befrat, as the Rebbe says, Shakavana because previous Atik Bavad, Ad Sherish Rishon previous Atik Zainsof. That in Chachma, it's not just that Chachma has within it the internal dimension of Atik, which is still a darg, but even to the highest, to the earliest source, is the inner dimension and the essence of Ein Sof, of Hashem Himself. So it already has the higher level of Etzim. Already has in it the idea of the essence of the Etzem and the Simcha Atzmi. So why do we ask Samach Samach? So he says, the fact that Primius Abba is Primius Atik relates to the internal, the deeper yichud of Abba ve'ima of Chachma and Bina. In order to achieve this yichud, we have to actually arouse it. We have to actually bring it about. Because the inner yichud of Ava is only is occasional. Only happens on occasion. Okay, this is an interesting line. So first of all, let's understand what is meant by talking about two levels of yichud of Ava. Before we said that Ava are train, rain, la misparshin. The two friends that are never separated. That the yichud of Ava is constant. Zivugayu Tadir. And when it comes to Zun, to Savanukva, there, the Daidim, there, the yichud is only the prakim, it's only occasional, on occasion. But here we're saying that in Ava also there is a level of yichud and a higher level of yichud that is only occasional. So the yichud chitzoni is what's called the terech kiyum ha'elamis. In order for the worlds to exist, the ongoing existence of the world. There's the whole discussion, right? Since the chayis of 1 year is nostalgic, goes back to its source on Erev Rosh Hashanah, and the new chayis comes down when we blow shofar by Tkiyas. So how does the world exist between Tkiyah and Tkiyah shofar? So the explanation is that's on a previous level, but the Chetonius, there is an ongoing chayis that continues, to keep the world going. And likewise, there's this idea of the yichud of Abba ve'ima, of Chachma and Bina, that is the tzorech kiyum ha'olamis. But when there is going to be a greater gilu in the world that is not natural, it's not automatic, but it's something that comes about, let's say, through avodah, right, to do a mitzvah, or it's a special time, there's a special gilui of Yom Tov and Shabbos or whatever. So for this, there has to be a higher level yichud, a yichud primi, that brings us about, and that does not happen at all times. That has to be, it says over here, tzarech la'ir lahamshich. We have to bring it about. We have to draw it out. Well, one other nakuda on this, and I kind of thinking this through, it's not entirely clear to me, but l'chayra, this is just the opposite of what we were saying before. Before we said that the kind of simcha that is more kevis, it's triggered by something else, but the etzem is not triggered by something else. The etzem is. So something that comes to the etzem, we said it was without hagbala. If it's without hagbala, it should be at all times. And we're saying that to bring about the Gilui Ha'atzam, the Yichud Plimi, and the idea of Plimius Abba, Plimius Atik, that the Atzam is alive within Chachma, is something that comes about through Avodah. It comes about La'ir Lahamshich. We have to ask. We have to say Samach to Samach. And that brings it out. So okay. So I think that. And I think that this will come out later on also, that in a certain sense, avodah of Yidden, of Neshamas Yisrael, is not considered an external trigger, but it's internal. That's what I think the Nakuda is, and I think that this comes out as we further on in the mind. So the Rebbe says, so Samach the Samach Reim Ahuvim. This is the bakasha that Hashem should bring joy to the Reim Ahuvim. Shetum Shal Chacham Bina Simcha Atzmis, that this Simcha Atzmis should come down to Chacham Bina. Ba'ad B'Primis Atzmis Ein Tov. So even to the extent that it's a Simcha that comes from the inner dimension and the essence of Ein Tov, which is the inner truth of Chachma. Shalamayla Meged Agbal Gamri, that is beyond any limitation whatsoever. Shesimcha Zu. Kanal, such a simcha taka breaks through all limitations, as you mentioned. And through this, there is a internal yichud, a yichud of the internal dimensions of Chachma Bina. And that this yichud itself should be in a constant way. So as I said before, that the yichud plimi of Avah is the prakim, but when we ask Samach to Samach, that this simcha that comes from the etzem can bring about that Avah, that the yichud plimi of Avah should also be constant. And then from this comes the next stage. Why is this important? Why is it important that there be this Gilui Chachma Bina? Is because of how it affects Zav and Nukva. That the Rebbe continues the next paragraph. The primary intent and motivation for this, that there should be this internal yichud of Chacham Bina, is in order that through this it should bring about that Zun should come to a level of yichud, which is also the prakim and has to be brought about, and this is how it's brought about. And this, the Rebbe Rashab says, is the main thing. Because ultimately the kavana of the Eibishter is that there should be yichud zun, yichud kushabricha shinte, and that should be, dir b'tachtonim, whatever is wrapped up in this. That's the point. So even though it's a higher yichud chachma bina, but yichud zun is the ikar. The Rebbe Rashab goes into a whole arichos about the idea of affecting the guf, and how the simcha v'chasana is with the guf. There he's talking even more than just zun. He's talking about gashmias, and that ultimately, in order to affect the body and the physical, that means that the koyach has to be coming from a higher level, and that's really ultimately the kabbal. The Rebbe Rashab talks about Yichud in the Maamar, that in Yichud Zun, that's where the etzem comes down. That's why the union of Zun brings about that there's something new comes into existence, that the neshamas are born. Right? In order to create new neshamas, to create something new, and that comes about through Yichud Zun. Right? So elsewhere, and Tanya talks about it also, there's a concept of neshikin, right? Yichud neshikin, so it's like a spiritual kind of yichud. It doesn't actually create. When a Rav teaches a Talmud, like the Rebbe Shah explains, elsewhere, right? That in teaching you can't give. You're not actually giving, and you're not creating anything new. The Rab teaches the Talmud is able to be makabel, so he's makabel. But when it comes to yichud gufni of a chasam and kala, then you actually have new life comes into existence because the etzem comes down there. There you have the power of the etzem. So this is true on a spiritual level with regard to zun, that they have latest hanashamas. But in order to achieve yichud zun, in order to bring about this yichud, in order that the union of zav and nukva should have this power to create, so for this you need to have first yichud primi of chacham abina. So v'zau Samach, Rei Ma'ahuvim, they were asking Hashem to bring Simcha to Rei Ma'ahuvim Begamati Yodoidim Zun, as we said before, that the Simcha that comes into the Reim not only affects them, but it affects the Ahuvim that's connected in the two ways to Reim. There's the Ahuvim as they are within the Reim, and then there's the Ahuvim, the Doidim as they are as of Nukva, the Gilui, but still have the resemblance to the Reim. So it's not only about Chachma Bina, but it extends to Zav and Nukva. Bakasha Shetiya Amshachas Simcha B'Chachma Bina Shadezeh Yichud Prim T'Chachma Bina V'Shvil Yichud Zun. We're asking that there should be this Amshacha of this higher level of Simcha in Chachma Bina, and to bring about a Yichud Primi of Chachma Bina. This is in order that there should bring about the Yichud Zun, because that is what Hashem wants. Okay, so this. So far we've explained the bracha. We've spoken about a lot of spiritual inyanim, but we want to connect this to us and to our avodah, and so that's what we're going to start addressing in the next design. Mentioned before, the very idea of making a bracha, Samach to Samach, is to bring about, to be ma'orer and mamshich. And in general, we know that avodah sa'adam brings about a response and is mamshich hamshachas. So even though we're talking about something that's very, very lofty, simcha atzmis, but it's still connected to our avodah. So the Rabbi says, Rapiza, Yuvan, Gama, Shaykhis, the Bakasha, Simcha Sister. Now understand the connection of this Bakasha to the rejoicing at a wedding. The Bakasha of Samach Samach Ma'uvim is something that applies in general. In order that there should be latest Hanashamas, there should be a world, there should be greater Gilei Lakus. Theoretically, you could say it every morning in brachas. You can make this bracha. We want this to happen. But we make the bracha specifically at a wedding. Why is it? We know that yesh me'ayin, to create something out of nothing, this is something that only Atzmos, Hashem's essence, has b'koyach to do this. In other words, creation is an expression of Hashem at his essence. It's not an expression of any lower darga that is not the etzem. The kol ha'odos v'hagiluyim, all the various lights and revelations from Hashem, the extensions, the manifestations, since no matter what level we're talking about, we talk about Atiki, we talk about but there is some ila isiba, there's some cause, there's some reason for it to be. So ein miyachaltam lahav is davar yesh she'ein loi b'hargashasai ila b'siba. So none of these levels in the highest iris, they cannot create something that doesn't have a cause. They cannot create a yesh. Yesh, that something should be a yesh, and it should be a different yesh. It should be a yesh that's not you or extension of you, but it feels, at least in its own sense of itself, that it doesn't have a cause. That the iris cannot create. The E Efshal Shum Nimtzal Ashpia Mashain Bekoiche. So I'll explain this. That you cannot give over something that you don't have. And if you are an existence that knows where it came from, you cannot create something that feels like it is independent. So to create a yesh, that is only possible by atzmos, because atzmos, Hashem's essence, is such an existence that he exists from himself. That does not exist from any previous cause, anything that preceded him. Chas v'shalom. He is the Kadmon. He is the source of everything. He's a Matzah Rishon. So such a being can give over that kind of existence to a yesh. So yesh ma'az b'klechatz. In a now we know that Hashem created the world yesh ma'ayin in the Sheis Mebereshis, and so his etzem was nimshach. The Rebbe puts nimshach in quotation marks because it's can't really talk about nimshach with regard to atzmos, but he kind of expressed himself, his etzem, during Sheis Mebereshis. And that was it was from Hashem's kindness, from Hashem's desire for chesed. He wanted to do good with his creations, and therefore he created. It wasn't triggered by anything else. However, after Matan Torah, from Matan Torah on, there's no more chafetz chesed. Right? We say we have 26 kilo chesed in Tehillim that correspond to 26 Torahs until Matan Torah. And after that, it's not Mitzat Chesed, it's Mitzat Avodah. Shloimar, so in general, the idea of Torah mitzvahs is to be mamshich, to bring out the expression of the etzem in Bria Yesh Me'ayin. But in particular, we bring out Hashem's etzem, and in a most visible and tangible way, when we do mitzvahs that relate to the concept of bligvul. Okemai mitzvahs like the mitzvah of having children. Kiyodua the beinin hayelada laili darachadar hugili kecha ein sof. As we know that the concept of procreation, that we have generation after generation, that humanity continues, keeps going. Every generation has another generation. We don't run out of steam. It's not like your printer that eventually it runs out of toner and it no longer prints. The father has a child who has a koyach hayilada to have another child, who has a koyach hayilada to have another child. So that's Ein Sof to that end. So that's revealing the koyach Ein Sof in within the human experience. Particularly since the concept of Hayilada is also a dugma, it's also an analogy for the whole idea of Bria Yesh Me'ayin. The Rabbi mentions this in the Maamar as well. That in a certain sense, it's not true Yesh Me'ayin, but in a certain way, having a child is Yesh Me'ayin, and Yesh Me'ayin is so there are actually two characteristics of having children that relate to atzmos. One is that it is Ein Sof, it's without end. It's the limitless power of the atzem, and also it's the power of the atzem to create something from nothing, and that's related. The Rebbe mentions in the Ara that's even higher because it's Ein Tchila. It relates to the idea that Hashem has no beginning. Not only is he infinite, but he has no beginning either. So, and this is a mitzvah. So this is the kind of mitzvah that is related to the idea of bligvul, and in particular calls out Hashem's essence. So v'zeh ma'ashem v'bakshim b'simcha nistuin samach l'samach. That's why, particularly when we're rejoicing at a wedding, that's when we pray to Hashem that He should bring joy to the Re'im Ha'uvim. Because the purpose of marriage is to have children. to be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. That's why we then request that Hashem should bring simcha to the beloved friends. That Hashem's essential simcha of the essence of Ein Sof should be brought down, should be manifest, should go into action and do what it's able to do. Because now we're doing a mitzvah, or we're rejoicing and we're participating in a mitzvah that reveals the power of infinity. Therefore, this should call out the response from Hashem that He should reveal His infinite power through bringing joy to the Re'im Ahuvim, to Chachma Bina, and through them to Zun. Shahua Iker, as we said before. So now we have a deeper understanding of the second part of the bracha, that like you caused your creations to rejoice in Gan Eden before. Why do we connect the rejoicing of Chassan Kala to the rejoicing of Adam Echal in Gan Eden? Because initially in Gan Eden, at the beginning of creation, there the joy was revealed. Hashem gave joy to Adam and Chava, but it was mitzad kechavas chesed. It was before any avodah was done. So that's what we're requesting, that now also through our avodah mitzvahs, and particularly through the mitzvah, through the rejoicing of a wedding, we should have the same hamshacha. That our avodah, so we look at our avodah, it's very limited. We're very small, and what we do is very, barely scratches the surface. Okay, so yay, we did a mitzvah, but that should bring about the hamshachas ha'atzmos. So that's exactly what the Rabbi wants to bring out of here. That's the power of avodah, that we now can ask and can trigger Samach the Samach Mahuvim, just like we got Eden Mikedem, just like it was at the beginning of creation when Hashem was not responding but acted, as it were, out of Kichavas Hesed, just from his own of his own accord. And I think that this is that this is what I was saying before, that when it comes to our avodah, this is not something else that's triggering it. It's because of because this is atzmius. Let's see how the Rebbe talks about this in the next in Oischas. So we've been talking about a wedding, but there is the grand wedding, which is Yom Chasanasai, Hashem's wedding, which is Matan Torah. And at Matan Torah there was a hamshacha of Simcha Atzmus, because that's what happens at weddings. As the Rebbe Rashab explains, the Maamar, the Ikra Simcha Sheberatzas Kol HaGedarim Usimchas Yisurin, that the main simcha that bursts through all confines, that is the joy of a wedding. The joy of a wedding is the Simcha Atzmus, and it has the greatest power of transformation and of expanding all limits. The Rebbe Rashab is Meirich on how the joy of a wedding accomplishes this. And this is true for a human being. This is certainly true for Hashem, that B'yem Chasunasai, there was a revelation of Simcha Atzmus. And the Rebbe says, realize and understand when we're talking about Yom Chasunasai, Yizum Matan Torah, we're talking about through Avodah. You could think that Matan Torah wasn't through Avodah. Matan Torah was Hashem came down. He reached out to us, Vani Amaschil. And after that, we have a concept of Avodah. So the Rebbe says we have to understand what kind of Yom Chasunasai we're talking about. Yom Chasunasai is Matan Torah. When we talk about Yom Chasanos, we're talking about when Hashem gave the second luchos. And the second luchos came about through Avodah. Came out through our tshuva, because the Gemara there in Tainus is saying that that's why Yom Kippur was one of the greatest Yom Tovim by Yidden, because it's Yom Chasanos. And why is Yom Kippur Yom Chasanos? It's not Shavuos, but because that's when the second luchos were given. The second luchos were given through Avodah. So our Avodah Satshuva, after Chet HaEgel, brought about the Chasana, brought about the great joy, the Simcha Atzimus of Hashem, and Yom Chasanos is Ruban Torah. All mitzvah. Truth is, this is true of every mitzvah that they call mitzvah tachliyas, because for every mitzvah we're supposed to say that this mitzvah is being done in order to unite to Shabricho Shchinte, as it says in Priyat Chaim. We only say the Shem Yichud once at the beginning, before davening. But that's because that one time saying it is supposed to extend for the whole day, for all the mitzvahs throughout the day. So we don't say the Shem Yichud before every mitzvah, but we say it once. But it's true of every mitzvah that it brings about an idea of a chasana. Every mitzvah is a chasana. So again, our avodah that we do a mitzvah brings about yichud kusha b'richos shchinte, brings about the idea of yichud. The concept of yichud kusha b'richos shchinte is also something that is spoken about with some arichos in the Samach to Samach. Call echad miYisrael. Now let's add another ingredient that is a well-known teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, that every single Jew is an only child to Hashem. Furthermore, there's a pasuk that says that the Yidden are my firstborn son, but it doesn't say Bonai, it says Beni, Lashon Yachid, that every Yid is a Yachid. Also in Matan Torah we find that Hashem said to each and every Jew individually, I am Hashem, your God, Lashon Yachid. And certainly the Simcha by the Chasana of a Ben Yachid is the greatest Simcha. Again, that was true at the time that the original Maamar was said, the Chasana of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And here the Rebbe alludes to it. Harei Sha'asimcha shalamayla shebekiyum kol mitzvah the kol echad ve'echad miYisrael yisimchas HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chasanos v'no yichidai. So it comes out that the joy that Hashem has when any individual Jew does a mitzvah is that Hashem is rejoicing at the wedding of his only child. Such a simcha bursts through all boundaries. So we shouldn't think that we're just little people. We have the ability to bring about the greatest giluyim, the gilui of the simcha that's Paris Kol Agdarim, the simcha atmis of Hashem, and that's through every aspect of Avodah. As I said before, B'frat, we see it most clearly by a chasana, by a mitzvah that is connected with Ein Sof. But it's true of every mitzvah. And that itself, I think, is something that can to bring about simcha. When a person understands the power of what we're able to accomplish through our avodah, that itself brings great. Like it says in Hayom Yom, you have to be constantly in a enthusiastic, knowing the great what can be achieved, what we can achieve. So I think that this is an akudah that the Rebbe wants to emphasize, taking taka from the Maamar of the Rebbe Rasha, but it's not. I don't think it's emphasized in the same way over there. There he talks more about the ruchnius ha'inyanim. He does talk about avodah, but he doesn't. But he talks about the necessity of simcha in avodah, various aspects of avodah. But here the Rebbe emphasizes the power of avodah to bring about the idea of samach to samach. And You know that the Friedrich Rebbe got married in Elul, and there's a very close connection with the whole concept. The Samach obviously was a Chasna Maamar. There were a number of other Chasna Maamar that were said that were related to the theme of Chasna, but it's connected to the time, to Chodesh Elul. There it says, B'frat, Chodesh Elul, this is especially true in the month of Elul, when the king is in the field, with each and every individual Jew, like I said before, even the individual has great power. That Hashem greets every Jew with a friendly face and shows him a smiling face. In other words, Hashem is showing great joy during the month of Elul. The month of Elul is a time of joy. That's a chiddush in the sense of the Alter Rebbe in particular, and his emphasis on this, that the idea of Melech Basada, because as we're going to say a little further on in this place, there's the concept of Yira is very strongly associated with Chodesh Elul in Shulchan Aruch and so forth. But the Rebbe wants to emphasize that there's the aspect of joy in Elul, and this is true also Api Kabbalah, as we see the Elul Rosh Tevis Aniva Dedi Li, and how Api Kabbalah it's brought down in Buddham as well, right? But the Elul is it's not only about fear; it's about our loving relationship with Hashem. Aniva Dedi Li, and here we have the term Daidim. Dafilu Daidim Shekayal Zun Shezivugam Merak Prakim, that even the Daidim, even Zav and Ukva, whose union is only occasional, only from time to time. But in the month of Elul, both Daidim are united in one word. Elul is Anila Daidi v'Daidi Li. They're one. So Elul is a time, in a sense, of Zivugayu Tadir, that they have a constant union, at least during the month of Elul, because the word Elul unites them. Move on. From this, we understand that the Neisach Al'in in the Simchas Nisuin, Yichud Kushu Brichush Chidesh, B'meshach Kol HaShonim, Tzadkim HaMitzvahs, that in addition, we have an additional dimension, that throughout the year, there is the joy of a marriage. Because throughout the year, every mitzvah we do brings about the union of Kushu Brichush Chidesh. But in the month of Elul, it's even with greater power, because now it's a time of Hashem's revelation in a way of Melech Basada, in a happy way, in a friendly way, and in the sense of Anila Dedi being emphasized in that month. And then the Rebbe goes on, he says, B'frad, B'Shabbosis, B'Chodesh Elul. This is especially true when it comes to Shabbos, which is the Maamar said on Shabbos, during the month of Elul. B'Chodesh Elul, taking B'Shofar, G'dei L'Hazer, Yisrael, Shasu Tshuva, Shenemar, Yitak B'Shofar B'Ir, V'Amna Yachadadu. Because during Chodesh Elul, there's also the idea of Yira, that we blow Shofar in order to warn people that it's time to do tshuva. As it says, can it be that a shofar should be blown in the city and the people won't tremble? So it comes out that in Elul there's also a concept of fear and of trembling, of terror. But Amnam, says the Rebbe, that's true only during the week. When it comes to Shabbos of Chodesh Elul, there in a year of Charada Elul, the concepts of Yir v'Cherda of Elul l'chayra, says the Rebbe, that they're not on Shabbos. At least we don't see them on Shabbos. Obviously, Shabbos is also Elul, but we don't have that open kind of terrifying instance of hearing the shofar blown. Shabbos ain't taken, but Shabbos in Etzubah, because Shabbos is two things. Number one, you're not allowed to blow shofar on Shabbos, and number two, you can't be sad on Shabbos. So any kind of somberness doesn't belong on Shabbos. So so what theme of Elul is operative on Shabbos is mainly the love. I am to Doidi and Doidi is to me. Simchas Nisuin Nefesh Baruch Hu Yisrael, emphasizing the joy of the wedding of the Eibishter and Yidden. Move on. From this we understand that whenever we add any additional aspect of Torah mitzvahs, particularly in the month of Elul, that bursts through all confines, including also the confines of Galus. The college of Torah mitzvahs shenyonim hepech Galus meharis gulasida. So not only to burst through the confines in our own avodah and in the Gilui L'kus in the world, but especially the idea of Galus, because Torah mitzvahs is the opposite of Galus. Every mitzvah has a small geula, like the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya. So any additional mitzvah brings the geula that much closer, that much more quickly. And what does it say about the geula Asidah? It says Vayemahu Yiyeh Gomer. So as regards to the geula Asidah, it says on that day it will be Yiyeh. What is Yiyeh? Is base pa'amim Yudke, twice Yudke. What does that mean? Hanashagam Vavke. Yiyeh Kema Yudke. That Shem Havaya is Yudke Vavke, but then Vayemahu, it won't be Yudke Vavke, it will be Yudke Yudke. That Vavke will also be like Yudke. Yudke is a Tader, just like Yudke, Chacham and Bina, they have a constant zivug, right? Rein Lamas Parashan, it's ongoing. Vavke is Tader. This is what he talks about also in the Maamar, that through the Samach, bringing the Simcha into Rein of Chacham and Bina, it affects that also that the Yichud Zun should be in a way of Zivugayu Tader. It should be an ongoing, a constant zivug, which is really Gula Sida, right? Because then there's no time of Helam. Gilui is constant. The Gula Sida Sha'az Yiyah Inanais Anisuin, which when the Gula Sida comes, that's when we're going to have the true marriage. Because these are Bishmais Rabba Sha'achshav in the Erusin Asalav Yiyu Anisuin. That now we're in a state of Erusin, but the completion of the Erusin, the Nisuin, the marriage is going to be when Mashiach comes. B'mheira v'yameinu mamash. Amen and Kain Tiyalanu.